This is Big Sky Voices. My name is Ben Booth, and my compadre
is Victor WAUMETT with Storyteller Films.
We have a special guest today, Terry Brunner. Terry Brunner is, well, let me tell you, I spoke to a senator this morning, and I said, we're going to tape this deal, and he said, I love this guy. He's so wonderful. So, Terry, you're loved by somebody.
That's always good.
Terry is a humanist. He's a liberal arts type of guy. He is a man who is not only understands the humanities, he loves people projects. He was with USDA running statewide the Rural Development Program. And Terry probably has funded or brought more money into the state of New Mexico than many bankers over the past few years. And so, Terry, let me ask you something. What turns you on? When you get up and shave and have breakfast, and you think, oh, I've got this project to do today, what really gets you going?
Well, I really get excited at the opportunity to kind of make big things happen in the state.
Yeah.
You know, that's what gets me going is to see the possibilities out there and then to reach those possibilities at some point. Because, you know, we all live in such a beautiful place.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes confounding that things aren't always going so well in such a lovely place. And so I really like to think of ways that we can make all of our lives better, really, in this beautiful place.
And do you focus mostly on rural New Mexico, or is... Yes, that's a good question.
Yeah, mostly when I was with U.S. Department of Agriculture, I was focused on the rural part of the state. I'm now with a new organization. I'm the founder of a group called Grow New Mexico that's working all over New Mexico.
So you've taken the whole state now?
Taken the whole state.
Okay.
Terry, when you were doing REAP loans and you were doing rural development, I went to a lot of those meetings and listened, and there were some fascinating, talented people out there. Tell us, can you just share one brief story of someone that really impressed you, or some project you thought was so creative or whatnot while you were doing that work?
Well, yeah, I think that there's just so many. What's so fascinating about rural New Mexico is you have some of the most creative entrepreneurial people in the nation working out there in these rural parts of the state. And I think people often think that the urban parts of the state are where everything comes out of and all the ideas and entrepreneurship and innovation, but really rural New Mexico has a lot to give as well. And so we always had people doing fascinating stuff, especially with value-added products. And you know, I'll never forget, there's a woman north of Socorro who has a shrimp farm.
A shrimp farm?
Yeah, and she was using actually it's freshwater shrimp.
Yeah.
And she grows them in tubs, and they're gourmet Asian shrimp.
Yeah.
That she sells to restaurants at about $15 a pound or so.
Yeah.
And she made a business out of this thing in the middle of the desert. And I mean, who would have thunk it to be growing shrimp in the middle of the desert? And that was a person where I went down there, I didn't know what to expect, and I was really just kind of shocked. She was a real estate agent that went into growing shrimp.
Yeah. Victor, I want to share a story with you.
Go ahead.
One time, Terry told me a story. He said, you know, we are allocated X number of $1 million per year for the state. And he said, if we don't use it all, it gets allocated to other states.
Right.
And he said, one of my biggest challenges, I don't know if you remember this conversation, he said, is finding good projects with good people behind it to be sure it gets implemented in this state. Still true, isn't it?
It's still the truth, yeah. I mean, there's lots of resources out there and available, and you're just trying to match these projects up with the available resources and make sure they move forward. And that's what's so frustrating, is that you know there's bright people out there, there's good ideas, and how do you bridge that gap so they get funded and they move along?
Right.
Well, two questions. One, I was a worker in a poverty program in the Appalachians years ago, and they used to call us the boys with the briefcases, and it was not a compliment. How do you overcome that sort of built-in suspicion of strangers coming bearing gifts?
Well, I think especially in New Mexico, you have to build up that level of trust. You know, people, you know, they're wanting to see that you truly care about their area and that you're about achieving results, and you're not just there to blow smoke. You really want to get something done. So I've always found that that you want to show them what you can do, but you also want to spend a lot of time listening.
Yes.
And giving them the opportunity
Yes.
to tell you about their community, about their project, why it's important, and get that level of understanding. So you're not just the government and you're here to help them.
Right.
You're about much more. You've got some depth to what you're presenting to them,
Yeah.
and then hopefully they enjoy that. So
Now, as I understand it, since you're no longer with USDA, that you're doing a lot of what you did do, and that is putting some real brain power together to enable people to handle the paperwork in order to get grants, or a city needs a airport or a street or a school or a hospital. If, for example, I had some kind of public entity and we wanted to put a clinic for Indian children here, could I or some person come to you, I'm just using that as an example, come to you or your team and say, show us how to do this, or can you do it for us, or can we pay you to do the paperwork? Because most people are completely lost in that.
yeah, all of the above, and we're willing to do it all, really, as long as it's benefiting folks in New Mexico, in particular the folks that have the greatest need. So we've been funded by several foundations to really to bridge the gap again between the project idea and the money that's out there,
Yeah.
to make sure it gets going. And so the example you have, health services for Native Americans, or educational services for kids, or ag projects, we want to try to help folks not only access the funding but understand how to access it. One of the things is, if you haven't been in banking or finance or whatever, all of these little financial vehicles out there make little sense to you, and you need someone to explain them in relatable terms,
Right.
so it
Right.
doesn't go over your head.
Yeah.
And so what we often see with projects is people are looking at two financing streams.
Yeah.
They want a grant, or maybe they want a loan from the local bank. But the reality is there's probably 25 different funding streams out there. They just don't know about
Right.
them or understand
Right.
how they work.
Right.
And so we're trying to bridge that gap there.
Well, I've always heard there's more money looking for good ideas than there is ideas looking for money. Do you find that to be true as well?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think there is, bankers and lenders and grantors, they want to do stuff.
Yes.
They're not holding back. They want to find the good project. They have people that are employing them to get those projects. They're not supposed to do nothing. They're supposed to do something. So you want them to be presented with a lot of good stuff out there.
Right.
How would
Yeah.
someone get in touch with you or your company or your team if they just wanted to make an inquiry?
So they can reach me at 505-818-9163. We're affiliated with the Grants Collective, which has a website, and you can reach us through them, through thegrantscollective.org. And they're an Albuquerque group of grant writers that we've teamed up with. So one of the things that we do is, if not having a grant writer is your holdup and your problem, we'll try to hook you up with a grant writer, so you don't have that excuse anymore, and we move your project forward. So the Grants Collective is a great group of people, and they're working hard to help with that gap too by providing those grant writing services.
Does it work for all kinds of businesses, or is it basically community served? For example, Victor and I talked a lot about the movie industry here because it seems to add a lot of cash when it's active. If someone wanted to put in a post-production business, or put a new studio facility or that sort of thing, are those types of things that might be have grantable prospects?
Sure, there's some grants out there, and there's also some loans and loan, what we call loan guarantees, especially if they're in rural areas. So we have a lot of studio interest for areas in and around Albuquerque and Santa Fe. And if they can get to a more rural area or a disadvantaged community, there's lots of incentives out there. And you look at Santa Fe Studios, that's one that's right outside of an interstate, so they're in a rural area, technically.
Wow.
So they can pursue some financing vehicles through the government. And but you also have, working with a project in downtown Albuquerque where you have new market tax credits, you have Department of Treasury funds, you have HUD funds that are all trying to do neighborhood revitalization. There's nothing wrong with trying to put a movie studio in that neighborhood as a way to revitalize it. So there's lots of different ways to skin the cat and finance these things.
What's a new market? What was that term?
New market tax credits are
yeah.
a long-standing Department of Treasury program where these funds are made available to nonprofits, public entities, banks, and lenders, and they're tax credits. So they sweeten the deal for investors, and they are directed towards areas that are disadvantaged, that might need extra attention.
What's the most exciting project in your mind that you're working on right now in New Mexico?
Well, there's
you
a
can tell us
couple.
about.
There's a couple good ones. I'm trying to think of which one I could tell you about at this point. But there's a couple. I really like the Picaris Pueblo. The Picaris tribe has a solar project,
Okay.
a 1 megawatt solar project,
Wow.
and they've got half of it financed. They're looking for the other half of it to be financed. But what's most important about that project is if it succeeds, they wipe out the electric bill for every tribal member. And this is in a community where,
It's a remote community.
It's a higher poverty level, higher unemployment, it's remote. They spend a heck of a lot of their monthly paychecks on electricity and on propane. The other thing is, if this project goes forward, they eliminate their propane, and they go towards electric, and they have no electric bill. That's a pretty big deal.
How do we join
So-
this tribe? Is there an application form?
I think you could probably ask them, but so that's a really impactful project. I mean, that's a big
That
deal
is,
for
because those people
so.
have no access to land for casinos and the other economic tract that many of
Yeah,
them
they're not a
have.
tribe that can put up a casino there or something like that. They don't have a lot of revenue coming in. But for people that are living on $20,000 a year or $12,000 a year, if you wipe out that $50 a month electric
Right.
bill, that's a big deal.
Right.
So I like that project. It's not a $5 billion project, but it's very impactful for the 800 people that live there. So.
Well, it has relevance to me because my home in Texas, I remember one month we had company, and in January, Christmas parties, my electric bill hit $1,400.
Oh my gosh.
I nearly croaked. And we put a wind turbine and we put solar panels on that old house.
Yeah.
And we got it whittled down to $200 a month. To me, it sounded great. But $1,400 a month was more than most people's house payments,
Oh, right. But it's a good investment. I have solar on my house.
Yeah.
I don't have an electric bill. It's terrific.
Yeah.
It's a little ounce of freedom
Yeah.
that you get, and you can use that money elsewhere, otherwise, in something else that you want to
Yeah.
spend your funds on. So
Okay.
it's a good deal.
Well, listen, we are just about out of time. And what is your last shot? If you wanted to say something that's going to get out to maybe 5, 6, 7, 800,000 people, what would you say? Here's your shot, man.
Well, I would say that great things are happening in New Mexico, and I hope people take the time. If you're from out of state, if you're in state, in New Mexico, invest your time into looking into what your community's doing, participate. If you're a financial person, take an investment look at New Mexico. We got good projects out here. If you're a local community member, get involved, push your community forward. New Mexico's hitting rough times right now,
Yeah.
and things are tough, but we need, I get a lot of hope out of these local communities where you see people getting interested and getting active and involved in their community, lifting it up. I think that's terrific.
I've got one quick question for you. Victor, you may have one too.
Okay.
If you could give a guess, we're not going to really hold you to this, how much money do you think in your lifetime through your programs you have distributed to people in loans, grants, or some type of economic incentive?
Well, I kind of know the number, right? It's $1.2 billion.
Here's the $1.2 billion
$billion
man.
man.
Well, listen, this is Ben Booth, and we're so delighted to have Terry Brunner here. He's doing, what do we call it? Rebuild? What is it? Grow
New Mexico.
Grow New Mexico. He's given
Grow
his
New
phone
Mexico.
number. We'll put it on the screen later when we do our editing. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Big Sky Voices, Ben Booth. I'm out of here. How about
and
you,
Victor
Victor?
WAUMETT, Terry, thank you. It's been fascinating.
Thank you.
Yeah.